Good evening, everyone. It is great to have all of you on the panel today. We are going to discuss about brand essentials for video marketing, wherein we will delve deep into different aspects of video marketing, whether it is spontaneous stories, social live streaming, video thought leadership, or video expertise and identity. We have a superstar panel today. We have Sujan Roy, who is the head of international business of Tata Motors. Raja Chakraborty, who is business director of luxury grooming at Raymond. Amit Sethiya, who is chief marketing officer of Syska Group. Divya Dixit, who is senior vice president marketing analytics and direct revenue at ALTBalaji, and Archana Aggarwal, who is vice president of Airtel. I'll get the conversation started. So first and foremost, in the last few months, we have seen a drastic change in the way in which consumers are responding to content and how they are prioritizing activities. Video has been at the forefront of this. Certain insights that I was able to gather was lifestyle and entertainment content has been doing well. But what is the most important aspect I want to bring forward to the panel and to whoever is attending the webinar, is that how content consumption has actually changed in the last 3-4 months time, and if the trend will continue to remain the same or we will revert back to old habits. So, there are three perspectives here. So one is a brand perspective. I would request, Sujan, Amit and, Raja to take that up, in that order. Content creation perspective is something that Divya can, shed a very good spotlight on. And from a media perspective, Archana can give, her, insight. So Sujan, open to you. What has been your experience?
So, one of the things that we cannot deny is that people have had a lot more time on their hands to consume video content. You could easily argue that there are most of us, while we feel that the work has actually gone up, there is a large section of populace which, at the very least, even if their work hours have remained the same, they have at least saved the time which was spent commuting, which in a city like Mumbai is substantial. Of course, other cities do not have such long commutes, but at least the commute time is now available for the consumption of video. And we see that people seem to have found their own genres, their own sub-genres. And whereas we used to have this communal watching of one particular screen in a house. So in my family, there are 4 people. We used to all sit together and watch the same programming. But now it has sort of branched out, and people are comfortable with their own individual screens. So consumption has become much more fragmented. People have time to watch, and they watch what they have the proclivity to watch. And I don't suppose that we will revert to our habits going forward. We will consume our particular brand of madness or whatever brings us joy, which will be very different for all the people on this panel, would be different for siblings, would be different for the people in the family.
Well, Sujan, you look after international business. Obviously, I mean, we will predominantly speak about India, but because you bring in a different perspective, internationally, which are those top 3 countries that you have seen a drastic change in your content consumption for your target audience specifically?
See, while I do look after international, I was just discussing with Divya, I do look after the marketing portion for the electric vehicles business in domestic. So I have to look after domestic also. And interestingly, while my designation says international, the markets that I look after are mostly developing countries, mostly in our immediate neighborhood. And we see a large consumption of Indian genres and Indian content in the immediate neighborhood. I mean, all the way till, say, North Africa, the amount of Indian-based media which is consumed, you would be surprised. You would see many of the serials which were the rage 8 or 10 months ago. You will see hoardings in Colombo, those Nagins and all those, weird serials which we find become popular are actually translated into Sinhala, into Malaya, Bhasa Malayo, and they are consumed all over the world. I was in Algeria and Algiers, in the biggest city in the town. There was a photo shoot, pre-wedding photo shoot, as is the norm. And the bride was dressed like an Indian bride. So I asked my, local contact, is she an Indian? She said, no, one of the things in the pre-wedding shoots is to dress up as an Indian bride. That's a must for the photo shoots these days. So we tend to underestimate the impact of India on in terms of video, but we have a much larger than our size dictates impact on the developing world, where we connect so much culturally, mentally.
I agree with you. So I was doing some bit of digging around, and we discussed about Ramayana and Mahabharata yesterday on the call, and I was looking at the Google Trends for YouTube search, and it was phenomenal. Not only in India, it is outside that content is getting searched for, and people are watching it. And it was amazing to see, how people are actually going back to their nostalgia, era. I mean, especially people who are in like post 35, and they were there in this late 80s and early 90s, and those serials were getting telecasted. People have gone back to them. Even for that matter, I've seen that traction of serials like Shaktiman have gone up during last 4 months time. So I think it was great. I think Amit mentioned a specific brand yesterday, how they took it up and played with nostalgia. Amit, you want to shed some light on that?
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Hi guys. So yeah, we were discussing as to how when certain mythological series restarted, I guess around 2 months back. Nobody believed in the possibility of talking to the consumers when this kind of content was re-aired, right? And I think and I was myself one of those viewers, because there was a nostalgia element attached to that kind of content, right? So it was surprising to know that maybe for at least first 3, 4, 5 days, there were no sponsors, right? I mean, like, it used to just start and finish in one go. And then suddenly this one brand comes out of nowhere and takes up the entire space and starts talking to the consumers. And again, in a way that it also adds up to the nostalgic element and creates that beautiful bond with all the consumers. And I think after that, because you always wait for the somebody to move first and take the risk, and then maybe you have those other brands in the clan who join it later on. I think that is what happened. So I think that is what yesterday we were discussing, as to how it takes some time for the brands also to take that courage and take that decision and go for those investments which are still very high.
So the brand he was talking about, I'm going to mention that brand.
I won't give the plugin. I will not give the plugin.
Okay, so let the brand name come from me. So the brand name is Amul, and they stay true to their core of nostalgia, being Indian, and going places, and they were able to actually get a good traction for their own brand. But coming back to another important point. Just the way we were talking yesterday, lifestyle and edutainment has actually been at the forefront to drive content consumption. So how to get a haircut, okay, was something I was checking Google Trends again for that, and it turned out that if you are comparing Mahabharata with how to get a haircut, obviously how to get a haircut had a lot more traction. And Mahabharata as content piece was nowhere near. So I could figure that because it was rooted in necessity. Everyone needs a haircut. Apart from lucky few of us, who don't have that much amount of hair. But it was great because I think what was happening is there was a lot of content that was missing, which would have solved certain bit of consumer problems. And there were a few starter brands which could have done so. For example, there was a brand that I saw on Shark Tank. It was a startup brand. It's called Cut Buddy. Okay, there's you put stuff and then you cut your hair and all of that. I thought those kind of brands can come forward and talk a lot about how to cut your hair, and their audience will be everywhere, right? I mean, you can just advertise, target those people, and then after that you can drive business a lot more. But looks like that didn't happen. But Amit and Raja, I want to understand how exactly you guys played on that front, and how you came about actually delivering different content pieces. Amit, you want to give your perspective first?
So, as a brand Syska, the first thing to note here is that while we are known for the flagship segment, which is LED lights, but over the last couple of years, the brand has beautifully diversified into a lot of other segments as well, like your grooming appliances, which you were talking about, right? Then mobile accessories, wires and cables, small home appliances, and most importantly, the smart home appliances. So I think because we are such a diversified brand today, the risk is also equally distributed. Because if you're only into one segment and suddenly when you realize that there is nothing that is moving around, then you have a big problem, or rather a bigger problem, right? But because it's a brand which is into a lot of other segments, I think we were able to sail through this unprecedented pandemic. I would say comfortably. And one such example of the segment we discussed at length yesterday was my grooming appliances segment. So at a brand level, we create three kind of content. One is for the awareness, which is typically my ads, which goes out in different kinds of media format. Second is basically for engagement, where we try to engage with the end users, in different ways. And third and the last category of content is education, because definitely there are a lot of other things that you want to understand, right? So in the last couple of weeks and months put together, the consumption of my engagement content and education has really gone up. And I think that is what we term as quarantainment, because people are looking at entertainment, value, because they have a lot of time. So example, to give maybe, say a trimmer, because we are also in the space of giving trimmers, right? So suddenly, by end of April, the demand for trimmers just shot the roof. And, as a brand, we were, in a very quick state to, relook at the distribution channels, to create that kind of content which empowers, the consumers to go ahead and indulge in self-styling, which they were never, been able to do, from last so many years actually. And the belief that whatever you will do is going to look beautiful on you. I think the core concept was even imperfection is beautiful. So we had a crazy time dealing with this kind of sudden demand in the grooming space. So much so that also a similar scene for smart home appliances, because these beautiful products are app controlled and voice controlled. And because people had time, right? So they were playing with those, products just to understand a bit more, about their functionalities, to, create that immersive experience. And everything that, they were doing with those products was actually increasing my digital footprint. And I think this is one such basic ingredient to go ahead with your digital transformation journey. So I think all in all, I would say that, yes, it was a difficult time. But as I said, because it's a diversified brand, we were able to sail through comfortably. Over to you,
Super.
Raja.
Yeah, Raja.
Yeah, I think, one thing that because we were talking about nostalgia, one thought that comes to my mind is that, these are anyways times when nostalgia is, really top of our mind, because purane din hi abhi lagta hai achhe the than, the current times. So I think, maybe consumer behavior is also getting influenced by that, apart from the fact that there is actually not enough content on television that was being made for, some time. So I think coming to business, I think, to be honest, first of all, it was a very, very big disruption. And, for us, at least for the month of March until mid of April, we were actually scrambling our heads that what's really going on and how do we really, move ahead. Because being an FMCG brand, and an FMCG company, because I'm representing the FMCG business, it's all about people working in the market, going and taking orders from the retailers, etc. So I think on one hand there was a disruption in terms of our go to market. Secondly, there was a disruption in our portfolio, because of course, Amit was very fortunate that they had let's say devices in their male grooming segment, which consumers were consuming. But I'm sure that even on e-commerce, I think till mid of April, there was a fair bit of confusion that what they can sell and what they cannot sell. So actually speaking, for 1 month we were figuring out that how to go about things. So I think first of all, what we have done is that we have diversified very, very fast. because our core portfolio at Raymond in FMCG was actually deodorants. And we have two brands, Park Avenue and Kama Sutra, and deodorant sales came to zero, right? I mean, the fact that, all guys, girls, they're all at home, not going outside, the need for deodorant is next to zero, unless we are very heightened, grooming conscious people. Therefore, we had to really figure out that how do we diversify our portfolio. And we actually kind of, built a complete hygiene portfolio very fast. And we were fortunate that we had a brand called Premium, which actually is a very small brand in our portfolio. It's a cologne brand and it has a room freshener. Premium cologne is a very, very old product. And we actually extended that into hand wash, sanitizers, etc. We actually launched new brands in the hygiene space. We have recently launched a brand called ActiSafe, which is in the hygiene space. We are getting into, surface care right now. So I think between April and May, we focused our content investments really behind three areas. Number one is new products that we launched. And we, of course, इस समय में पैसे भी नहीं है खर्च करने के लिए, that is also a reality, right? Because right now cash flow management is much more important than for many businesses. Those who are large, maybe they will look at investments in difficult times, but for medium-sized businesses, cash flow is a very, very important aspect of the business. So really digital therefore became a very important aspect of communication. And most of our 100% of our investments, whatever it has gone behind it, digital. So new products has been our first area of investment. Second is categories which were still getting consumed or were actually essential. So we really invested a lot on shampoo. We have a brand under Park Avenue called Park Avenue Beer Shampoo, which is a fairly young brand and doing extremely well. So we started investing on that, and that investment was, and all this investment in content format was, I would say, very functional advertising of brands which are, talking about their utility in these times. We did not get into, let's say, engagement-led advertising for two reasons. One is, we felt that, first of all, it's expensive. You can't be doing so many things at one point of time unless you have money to kind of do that. And hence, from an ROI standpoint, the best bang for the buck at this point of time was to be relevant, and relevant through right product and invest in that. So that's what really, we have done. On the Kama Sutra front, on the other hand, we have gone a little bit on engagement-led advertising because it is a surrogate advertising category. You can't just upfront advertise like that. And second, for Kama Sutra, it made a lot more sense if you talk about love, if you talk about, how, people are rekindling their relationships during this time, because a lot of these things, just became important and people discovered them. So I think, it has been kind of pretty diversified way of decision making. I would say on the hygiene and personal care front, we were more focused on functional advertising, product-led advertising, and largely, on, mediums like Instagram and, those kind of mediums. Whereas in case of Kama Sutra, actually, we went more on YouTube. We came up with more engagement-led videos, which were more user-generated content. That's what we have been kind of, doing during this time. So it's been diversified.
Your predominant, target audience, must be, is, teens and millennials, or, it's across. Is what
no, it's across. It depends from, category to category. It is not that, so for deodorants, let's say, it's more, millennials. For beer shampoo, it's really, really, I would say lower than millennials. It's more like, 18 plus. So it differs from category to category.
Okay. And how about platforms such as, TikTok or Snapchat is something that you guys,
I think, we have not used them. But yes, I think, you have to have a right idea to go into the right platform. You just can't, just kind of fit anything anywhere. So I think, there has been very good examples like Dettol and Lifebuoy actually kind of Dettol came up with a hand wash challenge, which was, used on TikTok, and it really kind of garnered huge views, and that was very relevant. I don't think we had really got or we were unable to crack, let's say, a right idea which could go into that kind of platform. So we focused more on Instagram, more on YouTube, those kind of platforms.
Super. Divya, from the perspective of long form content, say ALTBalaji has done some, phenomenal, kind of content on OTT platform like, Post Dead or Alive, or for that matter, Codem was a recent example. Also, there was another called the Test Case, which actually garnered some good traction. But I want to understand from your perspective on content, generation, not really from branded content generation. It's it's entertainment, content. First and foremost, how is the delta increase for you? Obviously, when it comes to subscription, is something that you want to understand. And what kind of content, genre perspective, sub-genre perspective has garnered traction. And third is, if advertising led, traction and advertising led content has, gotten uplift, is what we want to understand.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Clear.
super. So when, I mean, of course, COVID struck all the businesses, in a more or less with a propensity to slow down. For us, it's been a little other way around because, like you said, people are looking for entertainment, right? So there was a certain delta that we saw in terms of subscriptions increase. So recently, if you read an article, we also released an article that we are adding almost 17 to 20,000 subscribers every day. Now, subscriptions is the most difficult game to play in this country because you're actually asking a person to pay for his content. We've had to fight with consumer nuances that say, "Arey, par madam, मैं TV देखता हूँ." I mean, we did this study, and consumers actually said, "मैं TV देखता हूँ तो मैं पैसे नहीं देता हूँ. मैं OTT प्लेटफॉर्म देखता हूँ तो मैं इंटरनेट का भी पैसा देता हूँ, मैं आपका सब्सक्रिप्शन फी भी देता हूँ." What they tend to forget is at the end of the month, you're paying your cable wala for the usage. And now with the new TRI rulings, television has become equally expensive, and geofication has allowed OTT platforms to become far more massier. So this COVID phase has been pretty decent for us in terms of the data subscription upload. Now, what's happened to slow down, I think, our growth has been that there is no new content production which is happening at this point of time because all the shoots have been stalled. We've had multiple meetings with the chief minister as well, and he's now of the opinion that we can start shoots shortly. Of course, which Sujan was saying, earlier, that efficiency is bound to go down because the kind of SOPs, etc., that are going to come in place, your efficiency will go by half. If you were churning 10 hours of content, now you'll only be able to churn about 5 hours of the content, right? So we are already during this phase when it stuck, I think for about 15 days, we were hoping that this will, sort of this madness will get over. But when the lockdown started getting announced and you started understanding that the shooting is going on a stall, we started looking at the fact that there are almost 10 lakh new Indians coming on the internet every day. For them, my library is new. I've got almost 63 new Hindi originals lying on my library, right? No other OTT platform can say they have 63 Hindi originals. That's a lot. So we said, okay, for them, we are new. We may not have continuous new shows launching. We were launching almost 3 shows a month. It has now trickled down to about 1 show a month, right? Because the post-prod work, etc., everything, the efficiency is low, slow, it's happening slowly. So what we have done is actually we have started doing multiple marketing and business efforts in parallel. We've started looking at the new India, which is coming onto internet, because this COVID has also made, I personally feel, India very digitally savvy, as far as payments, buying, e-commerce, entertainment, everything is concerned. India is becoming more and more digitally savvy. So we said, why not take advantage of that? We looked at the routes where consumers can, sitting at home, even if they don't have a credit card, debit card, can, pay for the subscription. So for example, you will have a lazy pay, you will have a Ujjwan small bank. So we looked at those tie-ups so that we make the accessibility to the consumer much simpler and easier. Then we said, how is it that we can look at the fact that our library gets exposed to more and more people? So we started the micro influencers route, because, you know, when people are available and they're looking for content and entertainment, they also tend to look at a lot of these influencer videos. Now they can be beauty, they can be shopping, they can be, you know, do it yourself kind of videos. So you end up tying up with all those influencers and start working on the micro influencer and recommendation route. So we started doing that. And then of course there is the fact that, you know, we have one new show launch a month at least. So you're looking at that, because what happens typically is when you launch a new show on the platform, your library also picks up pace, because suddenly the noise, the digital, the social media noise around the platform becomes much, much bigger. What has actually also helped us a lot at this point of time is that print has gone, how do I say, aggressively digital, because there are no print copies happening. At least in my society, I'm not getting, and I checked with quite a few people, they're all reading e-papers. That has given space to so much of conversations and content going out, which was earlier limited, right? So there is so much more scope happening to reach out to the consumer and talk to them. They're also willing to do a lot more innovations than what they were willing to do earlier. Even in broadcast, all of a sudden television channels are open to having conversations on innovations, etc., because business has been hit. Other than probably a few FMCG players, daily essentials, or OTT players for that matter, advertising is seeing a dry run even on broadcast, right? So these sort of things have sort of helped us achieve that delta that we've seen during this period of time. Content will soon move into the production stage in another 15-20 days, and we'll start shooting new content. To answer your question, are we going to go back to our earlier habits? I am a little skeptical, I'll say this, because my question is, are you willing to go to a multiplex and sit in an AC environment with 300 people in the auditorium immediately? No. So that habit of going out, stepping out, watching a movie, catching a dinner, it will take a little time for people to come back. So there are two aspects again to this. A, immediately nothing is going to change. It will slowly, gradually over a period of next 6 to 7 months, you know, start really reflecting. The other part is that people will also get a little used to the fact that they can watch good content on digital. They necessarily need not look at other venues, and digital allows you to watch content as per your convenience, as per your time. You can stop, pause, play, binge, whatever that you want to do. You're not sort of, you know, challenged, or you're not told ki raat ko 9 baje ek episode dekho. I can from 9 to 12 binge watch the show and be done with it, right? So you're getting relieved of that tyranny, and more people have actually discovered what we've been shouting for the past 2 years, have discovered this in the 2 months. So I think that sampling will also bring in many people who were fence sitters, etc. That's my two take.
I think that change has accelerated over the last one and a half years time. As it is, people were moving to OTT. Like one example, I don't have I don't watch television. I have a smart TV. I put put the Fire Stick, and then I watch everything on on OTT. If I have to catch up on news, I have certain apps that I catch up news on. So I think, but it is certain segment. But what I wanted to understand, Divya, from you is that which are the geographies in India where you have seen a stark rise in adoption of OTT? Because obviously urban has always led it, but
correct.
In your experience, where it has come?
I'll just give you 2 bits. Urban's always been, pretty big fan of OTT because of the distinctive content that you find on OTT, right? However, this time period, we've seen a huge rise in tier 3 and tier 4 towns. We've also seen a rise in women watching OTT from smaller towns, which is a very, very heartening news. Because earlier we used to get this lot of, male viewership, for example, watching a Kar Le Tu Bhi Mohabbat, which is an out and out woman show. And we used to wonder, what are men doing watching Kar Le Tu Bhi Mohabbat, Not that men can't watch, it's as much as their show, but we really used to wonder. Then slowly we figured that it is actually that the man of the house has got the connection or has paid for it, or it is his mobile which was used to subscribe, his card which was used to subscribe, because the women in the smaller towns don't have an option to pay via that. I mean, my mom, she's a small town woman. She doesn't have a credit card, debit card. She uses my father's credit card to pay for a Netflix or for ALTBalaji, right? So the back end reads it as a male audience. However, now we are seeing a surge in women audience, and a lot of payments are coming through Google Pay. So these are little things that we are observing, which is making me think that India is becoming more and more digitally savvy now.
I was really happy to actually know that tier 3, tier 4 cities are moving to OTT bandwagon, and also women are specifically exploring
Absolutely.
more content. I think that is a superb insight. Thanks for that, Divya. Archana, from a media perspective, okay, you bring in a very rich experience on that front. What has been your experience from the content consumption perspective in the last 4-5 months time?
So, I'd like to say that obviously everybody knows, but I'll just reiterated the fact that, we've seen a rise in OTT. And in fact, it's not only the big names, but even the smaller players. Like you've suddenly seen the MX players, even ALTBalaji, as they said, the TikToks of the world, all of them have seen a phenomenal growth from the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So tier 1 was always there, but you're also seeing, growths like for the Woods, Sony Lives, and all of these OTT players are seeing a lot of growths which are happening in the tier 2, tier 3. That's one thing which has grown definitely. The other big piece which has grown is gaming. I mean, Ludo King in 1 week or something was the most downloaded game, and it even overtook PUBG, which is another big game. I have now some limited understanding of this gaming platforms. Okay. So again, gaming is something which we've seen a huge rise of. Then the other, obviously, social and news, because people during this period are were consuming a lot more news, because there was so much of this about how do we tackle this, what do we do, what are the safety norms. So there was a lot of news which was being consumed, and social obviously to share. So the TikToks and the Facebooks of the world, the sharing aspect, the Instagram, all of them from a sharing standpoint, right? Now, when all of these platforms, if you look at it, each of these platforms have, in terms of, and I'm going to put it more from an advertising standpoint, some allow long format, some allow fairly short format content. For example, Facebook looks at a 3-second view and says that's your ad, and your brand gets delivered, the message gets delivered. TikTok looks at I think a 1-second view, if I'm not mistaken, and says that's your your brand
Views delivered.
is delivered. The impression is delivered.
Yeah.
Then there's skip buttons after 5 seconds. OTT has skip buttons after 30 seconds, and so there are different formats going around everywhere, right? And from a brand standpoint, it's about adapting which format works best for you, because it can't always be about short format and being able to drive your messaging within those 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds or whatever. Sometimes you do need long format. And I'll give you one example, and specifically during this time, right? And Amit mentioned that there's awareness, education, and engagement. I felt that the lines were blurred between these 3 platforms, right? These 3 things that brands want to do. Because suddenly your awareness could very well be your education, right? So when the lockdown started happening, and a lot of prepaid consumers go to a shop to recharge their prepaid connection, right? And India is largely a prepaid market. It's not a postpaid market. Maybe on the call, all of us may be postpaid, but the rest of India is prepaid, and they don't use wallets, and even if they are digitally savvy, they still want to go to the shop and for whatever reasons, right? Now with shops shutting down, we realized that, okay, so how do we, while we did some other things, we activated some alternative channels and stuff like chemists and things like that, but that still did not really solve the purpose, because we saw some traction happening online. So suddenly, how to recharge online, which is an educational video, became an awareness-based video for us, right? So we started using this how to recharge online and we drove it as an awareness, and we started telling people how to do this versus just waiting for them to discover, right? In pre this times, maybe we would have never done this. Maybe it would have been just discovery, your self discovery of this kind of video, to saying, okay, you'll go and type how search and you will find it. But we actually started you, and this was not a short form video. We couldn't do it in 5, 10, 15 seconds because you had to explain to somebody how each step of the process, and especially given that it's money which is involved, it's important for people to understand, and that it is safe and all of that. So I felt that the lines of between these three things have got blurred. Going forward, maybe they go back to normal. I don't know. I cannot predict the future. But today, they are in my mind. They are blurred. As I said, there's a role for each of them. Some of our advertising does require long format because it requires some level of storytelling, right? So we have to tell that story, and it cannot be told in short format. But there are certain things that we have done, not during this time, but pre this time, where we've done very good short, good 6-second bumpers, for example, on YouTube, or even a 10 under in-stream ads on Facebook. So there are lots of which has worked very well for us, right?
Very, very interestingly, you mentioned about getting uniformity of KPIs across different platforms, because as a brand custodian for yourself also, because you're spending money. So how can I bring that uniformity? And if you can shed some light on it, I think that would be great.
I will. So, and I just wanted to just complete this one.
Yeah, sure, please.
Formats which have come out, and which were not only during this time, but they have been, but I've seen a lot more increased usage of these formats, like things like question and answers on, say, Instagram, or, ask me, or these virtual tours, I went on a trek way back in Jan, and now I'm following this person on Instagram. And the kind of stuff this guy does is, ask me a question. And it's so good because obviously there is no treks happening right now, but he's actually taking you through virtual treks, or he's saying, ask me a question and I'll answer those questions, and you can ask me anything under the sun. And I think this whole piece of engagement that a brand can do, people have the time to engage much more, right? And I think a lot of people want, in the first few days, the first few weeks, people were binging on content, and they were spending a lot of time. And if you see some of the reports of Bark, and the time being spent on smartphones and the time being spent on television was going up. But in the last 2-3 weeks, that time has now stagnated. In fact, it's coming down by 1 to 3%, right? So actually reducing, because now people have got tired. Like, how much more can you binge watch? There are people who will, but there are others who are like, what else? So this is the best time, I think, for brands to be looking at how do you engage and create that engagement in different ways. And I found this it's a great example, because every day when I open up my Instagram, I see this person has a video and is actually taking me through a walk and talking about some flowers, or it's talking about some animal that is visible and giving some more information. So I think for an information-starved economy, I think this is, a great time for brands to be able to give information. And I think Amit mentioned about how to, trim your hair, or how to, style your hair. So people are willing to try out these things. So in this period, I think there is a mix of both short form and long form content that people are willing to consume because they have the time. Now, coming to from a media lens, purely from a media lens, right? How do you look? Every brand, every platform is operating at different different video sizes, and it becomes very difficult for a brand person to see that how do I make. And it's very important for the brand person then to look at creating a uniform. And each brand has to do it on their own. What do they feel is the right duration, or I can't compare a 3-second video to a 10-second or a 5-second or a 30-second. It's just not possible, right? Because it's not comparable, right? If I have a 30-second video, I can't say that the 3-second view is equal to a 30-second view. It's like, traditional media people would say one 100 CD print ad is not equal to one 30-second TV ad, right? That same way, in my mind, these are not equal. And you need to create your own equal measures in trying to define your KPIs to see what works and what's working as a platform. For example, one of the things I think we see a lot of this, yo-yo in a way on terms of the VTRs, because we track that and we see what's the VTR that our particular ad got. And, sometimes if the ad is really engaging, you see good traction. And it's all about how do you engage the consumer to watch an ad. Like, we also had ads in the past which were far longer than 1 minute ads, right? We did something during Airtel Delhi Half Marathon. We created this whole concept of how your loved ones were with you while you were running. And we shot a video for that and we put it on it. And it was a much longer video, a 90-second video. But it got some traction because it was engaging, it was emotional, it had all the elements. So if you have the right elements, a long format content works. If you're looking at short format content, which is, it could be shoulder content, it could be something, you can tell people discoverability of short format followed by long format content. So it's a mix that each brand, I think, has to figure out on their own. But each brand also has to figure out what's the right mix from a long and a short, but also on what's their KPIs across and ensuring that they're all equal. So I can do a comparison versus equal. While each platform has different roles to play, but at the end of it, if you look at it from an ROI standpoint, you need to figure out the right metric for your brand. So that's important. Yeah.
Rituraj, what happened to you?
Yeah, and then there is some internet, issue. So, coming back to the second, say, imagine lockdown and you're getting internet issues. I mean, that's like, things have opened up. So,
Rituraj, regarding the length, if I can just join in,
please.
Going off slightly on a tangent, referring to one of my favorite pieces of content, the good old movie Golmaal. So Amol Palekar has come to meet Utpal Dutt, and Utpal Dutt asks him why his kurta is small. And Amol Palekar goes on this lengthy explanation about saving cloth. But fact of the matter is, the length of the kurta depends on the person's taste and what looks good on him and what is suitable to his requirements. And I would say that the length of the content is also in that direction. But generally, if I look at the trend, if I look at the fact that most of us have attention deficit disorder, we can't focus on a War and Peace by Tolstoy. I'm certain none of us would feel comfortable reading a really long novel. I think the general direction to go is short. Kurte chote hone chahiye, but ultimately kurte ki length everybody has to decide for himself.
Yeah, when you talked about,
Good one.
when you talked about, we may not want to read a, long novel. I remembered my days of, reading, Lord of the Rings and, Hobbit. And I remembered that. It was a long discovery process during that period. Where is the end going to come? And I'm like literally okay, but I'm like okay, halfway through. Okay, one chapter. Okay, gone. A third chapter. Okay, when is this going to get finished? I was like, skip to the end. But coming back to our second most important question. Is there's a classic debate. It keeps happening whether you want to do content in house, you want to outsource it, or you want to have a blended combination. I think it has become a really important conversation now because you want to deliver content, you want to grab that fleeting attention span that consumers have. But it's a really tight rope that marketers have to walk because first and foremost they don't have bandwidth. Second, it is too much of an investment to do it in house, and then if you if you can't you don't have quantum of work, then it just becomes too much of a challenge, and then there is a question about variety. So first Sujan and Raja, I want to understand from you first from a brand perspective what exactly has been your experience, and in the lens of last 4 months, has it become really important for you to basically figure out maybe one small department or one person who basically anchors it. So and then we'll move to Amit. He has an interesting perspective. Then Archana and Divya can give their point of view.
Rituraj, I had once done a session recently in which I said Sujan Roy has to become Pranoy Roy. What I meant in that is that even as a brand manager, I have to think like a person owning a television network because video is king. Quite clearly, if I look at the various media which is being consumed today, which is more effective, video is king. So there is no alternative but for the brand manager to think like a head of a large television network in terms of content. Having said that, right now one is under pressure for budgets. Even if we have the budgets, I cannot go out and shoot content. What has worked for me tremendously in these few months is self-generated content. And particularly, we have found that many of my team members have become so comfortable with Facebook Live, and we have been able to find partners who are able to support us do a professional, Facebook Live session. That we have been able to convert some of the knowledge that resides within us into content. Let me elucidate. For example, 3 days ago, we set up a portal for purchasing cars and servicing your cars in Nepal. And when we launched the portal, we did it on Facebook Live. And all the players have got so comfortable with their roles that they are on television or they are being broadcast, if I may say so. And the diction, the way it is being on the fly, shifted from one person to another. This subtle ballet, if I were to call it, people who are business leaders have become comfortable with it. And it was an effective way of disseminating to the Nepalese media and to our Nepalese customers that this facility is available. If you are uncomfortable coming to our showrooms, by all means go online. The second thing, the second hat that I wear is that of head marketing for electric vehicles. Now, electric vehicles. We have two products. One is called a Tigor, other is called a Nexon. They are available in petrol and diesel, and there is electric as is an option. We have tried to keep the product as familiar as possible. Where you would find the fuel filling flap, you find the electric charging point, stuff like that. So if you have driven a car, you know how to drive a Nexon electric vehicle. We have kept it familiar. But still, a potential customer has many questions to ask. And the person who's the best authority in terms of informing all his questions or answering all his questions is the chief engineer. So we've made our chief engineer a superstar. One of his KPIs is every week he has to have a Facebook Live session with one media or the other and answer people's questions. And that is what is driving visuals. People are sitting there, even people who don't have questions, they say, hey, wait a minute, I didn't think about this. Suppose there is no charging point and I go to my relative's place. How do I charge my car? Simple. Does he have a 15 amp socket anywhere in his house? There is a heater or a fridge or something where a 15 amp plug can be plugged in. You just have to pull a cord and that's it. Now, if he lives on the 30th floor, that's a different story. But by and large, a 15 amp cord is enough. So these are the things which we are able to do without spending money, which is able to engage the viewers or the potential customers, which is going a long way, in my opinion.
I think you hit a very good chord there, Sujan, because my previous stint I was heading brand and marketing for Mahindra Sustain, their solar division, and one of the product specifically R&D perspective, this kind of questions actually came up that okay, we are talking about charging mechanism. There is no charging station nearby. Do I remove the battery and then go and charge it in my relative's place? And how do I put it back? Are there battery swapping stations or not there? And I think what you guys have done is a great thing. That chief engineer becomes a hero, and he actually answers questions. So there is a phase to for anyone to actually ask question two, and consumers will relate with it because it's a human thing. You would want someone human who can answer your questions. At least gives you relevant answers. I think great. Raja, how about you? What has been your experience?
I think, first of all, I just want to digress a bit. I must say that during this, three months of, COVID, content and, stuff like that has been used in various different ways. And one of the incidents is that even to, I think, communicate with our distributors, to communicate with our retailers. I mean, in FMCG, just understand one thing that, let's say, visual merchandising in stores is so important. But during this time, सारी दुकानों के बाहर तो रस्सी बंधी हुई है. They don't even allow, sales people to go inside and do anything because they are, so much focused on merchandising. So we have actually used videos a lot to actually engage with our retailers. Engage with our distributors to really push the story of the products that we are taking to the market. And especially during this time, as I said, we launched a lot of new products. Now, coming back to, whether content it should be done in-house or, through your agency partners outside, I think it completely depends on the business. Sujan said about his business where, they have beautifully used, let's say, Facebook and in-house, let's say, utilization of Facebook to connect with their customers and their consumers. I think, see, in FMCG, it's very simple that a brand manager is not a content manager. A brand manager's key KPI is to deliver revenues for the brand that he is managing. And his job is product development, distribution, and consumer offtake generation. Content is just one part of that. It is not the start and end of it. Of course, there are also organizations like PepsiCo, which at some point of time said that we are in the business of content generation. But I think most FMCG companies are not in the business of content generation. They are in the business of delivering, creating, right solutions for the right needs, and then figuring out, right mediums to reach out to consumers, whether to reach out the product or the reach out the proposition. So I think as far as we are concerned, I think in our group, I think there are two different businesses. If I look at the fabric and apparel business, they actually do, at least till some point of time, they were doing content generation completely in-house. In fact, we had a complete company which was actually sitting in our Thane campus, and every day they were generating content, because there your content generation need is the core of your business. You are doing e-cataloging almost every day. You have new designs coming in, you have to shoot them, you have to upload them. You have every quarter you have a new what is spring, summer, and all this kind of seasons coming in. So the need and quantum of content is very high. Whereas in FMCG, the quantum of content is not as high as, let's say, in a fashion business. And therefore, we really kind of depend a lot, I would say, on the partnerships that we have. The second part is that, content is, and I think Archana was speaking about, see, I think all of us are learning, first of all, how to really adapt. I mean, it is not that it's a rocket science that, that today, there is a TikTok and this. The principles are very simple. 10 years back, there was only television where I, as a layman, was consuming content. And now, I am consuming content on multimedia. Okay, so, and my task as a marketeer is to really figure out, not just, to adapt to that medium. And adaptation to that medium just does not mean, that whether you have a long format or a short format. It also means that how your communication is like, right? I mean, you can't make the kind of communication that you had made for television, okay? You make it for Instagram, because nobody will watch it, because the consumer who is watching Instagram, their communication consumption is very different. It's very visual, for example, right? I mean, if you had to sell Dalgona coffee on television, you will make possibly one kind of communication. And if you have to sell Dalgona coffee on Instagram, you will just focus on that, beautiful picture of, that coffee. And that is the driver of making Dalgona coffee by, others. And versus maybe in TikTok, when you kind of do that, you will do it very differently. Maybe, you will use music, you will use dialogue, and you will create a story around making of Dalgona coffee. So I think it is very important for us, all of us, to really keep understanding how it happens. We do a lot of business on e-commerce. I mean, the content on e-commerce is very different, right? I mean, I am in Amazon, and if I have to build an A+ content in video format, I'm not going to talk about, I'm not going to make a content which I make for, let's say, an Instagram or Facebook. There it has to be educational, because the consumer wants to know why should I buy, and what are your, USPs as a brand, and yet it has to be very impressive. So I think the task for us as brand managers is to understand these nuances. And this nuance you can't understand yourself, okay? Because I don't think, all of us are kind of, so superhuman that we understand everything. I think you can only understand when you actually kind of, deal with people who are either doing it, which is basically the owners of the media, or the agency partners who are possibly doing it every day and day out. So I think it is more about understanding that, adapting your content accordingly, and fundamentally it's all about ROI. I mean, It's not about that whether you make engagement videos or you make, very functional format content. It's all about ROI. It's all about how much money you have got to spend, and you make your decisions, more rationally and logically. So I think that's my view as far as, on content and where it should happen and how it should adapt.
Hard hitting point, Raja.
Yeah.
Amit, I know that you have figured out one way, for your organization. Whether it applies to others or not is a different thing. But what has been that way that you have, tackled this?
So, as I was talking earlier, in the kind of content we create, that decides, who's going to drive that content piece. So if it is about, say, the brand-led content or the engagement content, the core marketing team comes at the forefront. But because it's such a diversified brand and we are dealing with more than 600 SKUs, right, across different segments, the role of even the product team becomes very, very important, because the content piece, which is, created for educational purposes, it requires a different set of understanding, right? So maybe I'm not the right person when it comes to the technicalities of the product, right? So, and it's a human tendency, because there are a lot of things and, appliances you have at your home, which you're using it, but you don't really know how it works, how it functions, right? Because you're just using it mechanically. But yes, there are times when you want to create certain content pieces with which you can actually educate, the certain set of consumers who really want to understand their products in detail, right? So that is how I sort of, we take a call. And overall, my perspective is that, whether you want to do in-house or you want to, give it to somebody outside, I think that typically depends on 3 parameters for me, at least, because I have seen a whole, sort of a journey from a commodity steel background to even a real estate, even now to a FMEG category. That is what you call there, fast moving electrical goods. So if the nature of the business is very, very technical or complex or more B2B, right? It's important to, create those kind of expertise in-house, because no matter what you will do, in terms of briefing and teaching your outsiders, they won't be able to understand your product or your services. So I think that is one parameter for me to decide, okay, whether you want to go outside or you want to remain inside. Second is, I think, how really open you are in terms of, getting those feedbacks from people. Because I think over a period of time, because you are so attached to your brand, that, you decide that, okay, I'll create everything in-house, and maybe that's not the right thing, because, you are so myopic in your approach, because every parent likes their kid, right? No matter how bad that kid is, actually, we don't know typically. So I think that's second point. And third is, obviously the volume, as Raja was talking about, I think it's about ROI. So I think if you have like a really big volume to address and create, I think it's better to give this kind of a job to an outsider as well, because they are known to drive that thing for you, right? So maybe I'm a great marketeer, but maybe I'm not a great content creator, right? Because each one of us has a different capabilities. So I think that's how we decide few things, and it's important, I think, for your stakeholders, which I really believe in, and to come back to you, every now and then to tell you that, okay, listen, this is the reality of your brand. Because if you do things on your own, then maybe there is a small possibility that you'll be carried away because of the sheer respect and love you have for your brand. So I think somebody from the outside, needs to come and give the right consumer perspective. Not like you're not a consumer yourself, but I think it's a small recheck that you should do, right? So I think that's how I look at, looking at the setup of the content.
Sounds good. Divya, how exactly, I mean, obviously your bread and butter is content, that to long form, but obviously you have to do it, in-house. But when you're actually speaking with brands, how has that feeling, been? And say for example, if you take last 1 year and then you take last 4 months, okay, how has the conversation changed there? And branded content has, more brands are outsourcing it to, maybe you to make that and maybe use it in some manner, or it is very different.
So I just want to say something here. See, we're a SVOD platform, right? For SVOD platform, the main business model is subscription.
Right.
We don't really allow advertising on the platform unless it's content integration, because the consumers are paying us for a seamless experience, right? And we don't want to interrupt their experience at any level. So it has to be a content integration point of view, or at best we get into co-marketing associations with various brands for various shows. So a product which is already created, shot, and you will do surround noise around it. You will use the main leads, the star cast of the shows, etc.
Yeah.
Having said that, I would just add on to what Amit was mentioning. If you truly want to scale up the content, like Raja was saying, that there are two pipelines of the business where there is constant content creation. We've found this, at least at Alt, where we've got almost 100 shows in the pipeline, that we had to divide the shows into multiple partners for the scalability, right? Because there is a certain pace at which you want to launch the shows. Like Amit said, there are certain different viewpoints, stories, concepts, genres. You want various ideas. We have one of the largest production house, which is Balaji Telefilms, but we don't give all our shows to them for the simple reason that there is a certain way they work. There's a certain way they will think, right? And you want different expertise, you want different graphics, you want different experts, you want different thought process, and that's how content becomes diverse and content becomes scalable. Now, this is the part which is the main core product of our business. The other part is the marketing and the direct revenue that I look after, along with how the shows are doing. So even for marketing, while I have a full-fledged OAP team of 15 people working with me to create video content day in, day out. We also outsource a lot of our short format video contents, because at any point of time, you're talking about your various shows, you're talking about library, you're talking about subscription, and there are multiple thought processes we need, plus scalability. You cannot just work on one video for 24 hours. You have to have multiple videos being churned out. So we work with in-house and external teams, right? When it comes to brands getting integrated with us, we're very clear. Like I said, the way that we work with brands is that the teams will start connecting with various brands about the concepts of the shows which are going to go into the shoot, right? Some brands, of course, every brand will pick up, a show. So for example, I'll not name the brand, but there was a consumer durable brand, which were very, very clear that they wanted a very family-oriented show in which they wanted the woman, to be shown in the kitchen, using the consumer durables, creating a fancy meal for the family. Now, all this has to be worked through before the shoot is commencing, because those are going to be integral part of the shot and the scenes, right? So this is how, as far as we are concerned, we work with AFP material. Beyond that, we are not really, interacting with brand in making AFPs, but I think it's time for brands. And I honestly feel so, because I also come from broadcast and I've handled in my marketing avatars AFPs over there. I think digital AFPs, if brands were to consider, will bring far more value, for the simple reason that digital is forever. What will television do, broadcast do? They will showcase your AFP twice prime time, and after that probably give you, depending on the deal, they'll give you another 2 reruns. Beyond that, there's nothing coming. Whereas digital has a library value. It's there for people to stay. It depends on the brand, it depends on the platform. How is it that you can amplify, really get people talking about it? And there are really successful examples of various brands who've done beautiful digital content and have gained huge popularity out of it. Especially liquor brands, because they don't have very many other mediums. So I think it's time for brands to actually start exploring how to, tie up with an OTT platform, or even if not tie up with an OTT platform, how to use digital content to their foremost. We've been doing it. Being an OTT platform, we use content and influencers all the time to create noise around the product. For me, a show is a product as a marketer, right? So we do this all the time. And today for us as an OTT platform, digital, whether it's Instagram, whether it's, we use everything. We use Instagram, we use Snapchat, we use TikTok, we use Facebook, we use Twitter, we use YouTube extensively. And for every medium, we create a differentiated video or a communication or a static post talking about it. So for example, on TikTok, if you put out something which is very serious, it's not going to work, right? Because it's meant for mass India. So even in the most serious of the shows, we'll either pick out the music or we'll pick out the fun instances that we believe people are bound to replicate. They are going to use that as a background, create their videos, put out the hashtag, create a challenge and run on it. So every medium has its peculiarity. I think it's about time brands started using them very smartly. The dependence on television is still a lot higher. We've seen that in US, digital revenue surpassed television revenue about 2 years ago. Let's see how long it takes in India.
Yeah, let's hope. Yeah, here also we get some different, different thinking, in perspective. Archana, what has been your, view on the overall, in-house outsource, kind of a conversation? I know that, it is very close to a particular brand, and how is your team's configuration and whether that quantum of work is there or not there. But in your capacity, in Airtel, how exactly it has been happening is what I want to understand.
To a large extent, I agree with what Amit and Divya has been saying. I think each brand has to decide for themselves as to, actually you have to first answer the question, why do you want it in-house? What is the advantage of having this whole piece in-house? And is there enough scope of work for it to merit a full in-house team? Because when you're talking about creating content in-house, it's not only about people writing out scripts, but it's also about shooting, production, post-production. That's a full team which is required, right? So do you really need that? Because and that's what I'm saying. The first question a brand has to answer is, why do I want it in-house? Okay. If you're able to answer that question, great. Otherwise, I think, outsourcing, there are enough and more stuff which is available outside, and you get different points of view, different ways of looking at things. I think Divya mentioned it for them, it's very important, given that, when you're talking about a particular content piece or a show that you want to advertise, how do you write? You have to look at the show broken up to appeal to multiple people, as my understanding, right? And each of that, each person that you want to appeal, the show has to appeal to, it has to appeal to in a certain, to touch that emotional chord of that person. So one could be emotional, one could be romance, something could be comic, and so various things like that, right? I think given the scope of work, and as even Amit mentioned, maybe there is a thought about, do you want to hire one person who actually is in charge of creating content, but when I say creating content, not in-house, that person, he or she is the person who then briefs various agencies or briefs various people, works with them very closely to figure out what is to be done, how to do it, and things like that. Because many a times marketing people, there's so much to do that you might not be able to do, create the kind of content you want to create. And there's a lot, as Divya also mentioned, each platform has different kind of content that you require to be, you need. And one person doing this, I mean, in the sense a marketing person doing advertising, looking at, business, looking at various things may not be possible. So there could be this whole thing of having one person in the team who's actually the content expert and is looking at how the content and streamlining that piece. Because I think as we go along forward, content in terms of, brands are going to get more into how do you engage, because just pure advertising on digital may not work. I don't know. But creating content which helps to engage consumers to drive your brand could become something, as I said, I've already started seeing this with a lot of brands and a lot of small guys, small people, very small businesses doing a lot, such more innovative stuff about ask me questions, we will show you this, and doing so many things like that, which is really interesting. And I think a lot of brands are so soon going to start getting into it. And some of them have already done those things.
Yeah, actually, I saw a lot of content. So there were a few very good examples from ready to eat, ready to cook kind of brands,
Yes.
and I saw a stark increase in the kind of content I started seeing on my smart TV. It's not even like a normal cable. It was smart TV, and they were actually pushing content there. So I think. We have had a very good discussion. Actually, I just got a prompt that maybe we have one question from Q&A that we can take. So I'm just gonna read it out. So there is this one question which says that how did you discover that these were women viewers? I think Divya, it is to you. and if you can shed some light, on that, how exactly you figured that these were women, viewers who, were watching, content in tier 3, tier 4, terms.
So that's why digital data analytics exists, right? So I also head the team of data analytics, which allows us to capture the certain details which are legally allowed of consumer socio and demo at the back end, right? While I'll not get into the semantics or the details of the same, we track the socio and the demo on a weekly basis for the health of the app and for understanding what are the shows, what are the products being watched, liked, disliked, and to also map the consumer life cycle to understand at what point, a certain segment of the consumer dropping, how many shows a subscribed consumer, for example, is watching on the app, etc., etc. So there are multiple metrics that the analytics team runs through. So one of the metrics that we discovered, like I said, was a shoot up in the tier 3, tier 4 subscription data. The second metric that we saw was the male-female ratio seeing a skew, right? So for example, if from smaller towns, I'll just hypothetically say a number, if from tier 3, tier 4, let's say, and there are certain, sets of towns and cities, we bungle as per the consumption, as per the monies, as per the, of course, the mark data as well. We saw that the skew, let's say, of female shifted from a 35% to a 45%. It's a hypothetical figure I'm saying, since these are all figures that I can't talk about. But we saw a substantial change in these last 2 months, which is allowing us to again reassert and say that women in smaller towns are also turning towards OTT platform to look for differentiated content. Of course, this can also be because of the fact that today broadcast doesn't really have new shows to talk about, right? There's a dearth of it. So for example, we did a deal with ZTV and 3 of our digital shows went on to be aired onto broadcast. Now that's our first time for this to ever happen. Normally it's catch-up phenomena, so TV shows come to digital and people catch up. This COVID has actually seen a reverse phenomena happening, which is content which was created for digital actually went to be telecasted on Z3 of our shows, Barish, Kehne Ko Hum Safar Hai and Kar Le Tu Bhi Mohabbat, on prime time, no less, on one of the biggest GC players in this country and globally as well, right? And of course, their catch-up also carried it. So these are the kind of things, which have been happening, and this has all come out of the data analytics that we continuously run and analyze on a weekly basis to understand our report card.
Super. Thanks, Divya, for that. And I'll pick your brains, otherwise, in a different conversation to, understand a little better, how things happened. But before we close, I wanted to take, one sentence, or maybe if you want to, summarize how the new normal of video marketing is going to be going forward. Say if you have to pick 3 words or 1 sentence, what's that going to be? So first we start with Sujan. So we'll go in a linear manner. So first,
if I were to pick up one thing that I would advise on video content, it is to create sustainable properties. If I look at a property like, say, Coke Studio or something like that, so that the viewer knows what to expect, he knows what sort of content is going to come from this brand, and it becomes an institution in its own right. That is one thing which would be my personal endeavor as a brand manager, to create on a video property.
Okay. I think he's dropped off.
I must have had some.
Yeah, he's dropped off.
Archana, maybe your views on content?
See, I'm going to look at it purely from an advertising standpoint. I think I've said a lot of already said that it's a mix for me between short form and long form content. And also, I think how do you utilize each platform to its advantage for me? Because that's going to stay. That's not going away. Trends will come and go, but how do you utilize each of the platform to its advantage?
Cool. Raja?
Yeah, I think, I think 2 aspects. One is, when there was television, we could have switched channels, but we would still see advertising. I think in the digital world, you can skip, right? And you can, so I think, and then you can skip in various, like Archana was saying, kahin pe 3 second pe hi aapka ad pakad lete hain, kahin pe 1 second pe, but from a consumer standpoint, consumer has so much more choice not to see your ad unless it's a true view ad or, unskippable ad and stuff like that. So I think the first thing is that because of the consumption behavior changing, I think as a brand, we have to continuously understand that what kind of content do I make for what kind of media. I think that's one. I think the second big thing that is happening is technology. Like I think Divya was saying, that so much of, artificial intelligence is coming in, data analytics is coming in. And if you are advertising now on digital platforms, then I think how do you continuously really upgrade yourself, your skill sets to use data analytics to become more personalized in your messaging is, I think, is the area of development from a marketing standpoint. And that's going to be very, very critical, because if you don't do it, we will be left behind. So I think these are the two aspects for me, which is very important as a marketer.
So I think I won't answer this question because I'm chipping in for Rituraj, who is not to be seen.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so I think I'm joking. So I think my point is quickly that I think I have been struggling with this thought, and I think it's a great platform to sort of talk it out right now. See, whether it's a long form content or a short format content, ultimately, you're talking to a consumer, right? And there is a different objective that you have every time that you create one piece. I think the point that I have in my mind, and I think I said about struggling, is the fact that we have this one mindset, right? That we create this one master copy in this country, and then we go for editing, right? Chalo, isko 5 second kaat do, isko 10 second mein bana do, aur isko to 30 second mein rakhna hai aapko. My point as a marketer is, for how long we will stick to this old, mindset, which I don't think is the right one, because my point of view is that each medium, each platform, and each format has, its own different nuances. So can we have a fresh take from the marketers? Because unless and until we will not change our mindset, I don't think even, other stakeholders will come back to the same belief. My point is, can we have a different approach that, okay, when you have a concept, great, but that concept can have different expressions, on different platforms, on different formats, so that, you don't end up doing that copy paste job across different, requirements. So that's my take. I don't know how much of sense it makes here, but I just felt like sharing this right now.
Yeah.
And Rituraj, I did your job of the last minute moderation.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And now, yes,
My turn.
Reminded us of childhood. Mera number,
Yes,
mera
yes,
number.
of course. Mera number. No. So jokes apart, what we have, see, I'll tell you one thing. The industry that I work in, creating content for a marketer is the biggest challenge, because you're not the most creative person, right? There are some 30 creative people in the company who are challenging everything that you're putting out and saying, oh, this could have been like this, what did you guys do? So actually our job is fairly difficult, but I think two things that we focus upon while creating content is, of course, other than the normal show cards, etc., that you do, you need to have, you need to know why you're doing this, and B, that this that you're doing better be something that stands out. So before we put out even a library video, for example, we'll put out a library video which will talk about the fact these are top shows. Now, these are top shows any OTT platform can say, right? Why are these the top shows? What is the reason for you to say that these are top shows? Were they greatly critically acclaimed? Were they getting great IMDb ratings? Was the star cast so fabulous? Was it a Karishma Kapoor debut show that you can really go to the town and talk to them about? So why are you doing this? How is it that you're going to amplify this? The way that you're creating that video better stand out and makes it shareable. Can I make it shareable? Because it is only when it starts doing, and in our world, it's only when it starts doing WhatsApp circles, various, like I multiple times get videos coming back to me from various friends saying, hey, you know what, this popped up in my school's group, or this popped up in my mommy's group, or this popped up. Then I know that the content has truly won the war it was supposed to do, because it started circulating on its own. That is when you're cutting down your marketing costs, because you've actually created a content that people genuinely want to share, either to laugh about or to discuss or to just throw their weight around and say what crappy content. Even that is okay. So for example, I'll give you an example. There's this guy, I'm forgetting his name, who wears wings and does these weird videos. I'm forgetting his name, I'm sorry. But, and people talk rubbish about him. But people share his videos constantly. They share it constantly. It comes back to me from so many groups. That guy has become a star. He's earning tons of money out of YouTube. And he does crappy videos, Or there was a Dinchak Pooja, who's such a horrible singer. But you would be amazed at what she's earning through YouTube just because people are, sharing her videos and crapping on her. So in our business, unfortunately, every publicity is good publicity. If it is good and viral, brilliant. And that's what we aim to do, actually.
It's an interesting point because there's one, channel that I've subscribed to, and it talks all about superhero, genre, conspiracy theories. The channel name is Emergency Awesome. The guy's name is Charlie Schneider. He has more than 2 million subscribers on his channel. And what he does is he does only this, and his giveaways are all life size those superhero
figurines,
life size figures, and people are crazy about it. Another example here, closer to home is Geek Fruit, which actually does a lot of same kind of content. They have also seen pretty good traction in that particular segment. So yeah, there are people who are doing that and they are getting really good traction about it.
Absolutely, there are people who were actually nothing, and TikTok has given rise to so many stars. I was shocked. I was in this conference and there were these 2 TikTok stars. They were hardly 18, 19-year-old. They're earning lakhs doing TikTok videos. TikTok has given rise to so much of economy. It's not even funny.
Yeah. So Amit, who is next? I need to ask you because I was not there.
We've all done.
We were all done. Which is why I had raised my finger saying my turn.
So I think it was amazing. I myself have learned so much from all of you. I think we will remain in touch.
Yes.
It was great. Meeting Archana, Divya, Sujan for the first time. Amit and Raja I've known for quite some time. They are dear friends, and it was really good to speak with fellow marketers after such a long time. I think Inkspell has done a great job, and I look forward to more of such sessions going forward. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to all the participants and viewers who are part of this webinar, and have a great week ahead, and let's hope and pray that we get out of the COVID frenzy very soon.